Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and X. Now we are joined by 10th Man, Neil, D-Rose, Refracted Curvature, Adam, Arwin, Righteous, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome, one and all.
Hello, hello, hello.
Good afternoon.
Get it on.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, good to have you all. Any
to be
evidence for
here.
self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
What's that? What's a presupposed spherical Earth? Can you break that down for me?
Going to need breaking down because the terminology is going to have to subtly change, Neil. So when I say presupposed, I've been ignoring the sounds of those V10s and V12 Lamborghinis going along the highway above me, because the presupposition, simultaneously something that I moan at people like Brian and Anthony Riley for allowing their opponents to have on their behalf. In other words, Anthony will start with the fact that it's a presupposition of an R value. It isn't. It's a derived calculable value taken from a flat measurement. So to say it's a presupposition would be to say we start with the assumption that we're on a ball. Well, yeah, that's true. But little did the anti-flat earthers and globe believers realise when they did so, they ignored the devastating truth of where their ball Earth came from. It's not presupposition, it's flat Earth requirement. So I feel the terminology should really change, perhaps, because it isn't strictly accurate to say it's a presupposition.
Well, I'm saying that because... Sorry.
I'm done.
I was saying that because don't they say that it's not a perfect sphere, right? It's a little chubbier at the bottom. So how is that a presupposed spherical Earth?
In the middle.
It's not a perfect sphere.
Chubbier in the middle, but I like the idea. We're going to be speaking more plainly.
Yes, well, the plane is where it's derived from, Neil. So the presupposition thereafter of this reification fallacy, which we've always described it as, still holds true. They are having to reify the sphere they've derived from flat plane measurements into existence to, strictly speaking, beg the question, because they're not aware most of the time. Most of our opponents currently, up until recently, were not aware. The reason I know that is because we weren't aware, and they are essentially the same as us, just on a slightly different path. So unless they're literally deceptive, that is to say they did know the globe Earth measurements and derivations and calculations came from a flat plane to begin with, but they chose to ignore it and tell us it's spherical. Oh, definitely we're actually standing on a sphere, even though I know it's been derived from flat Earth elevation angle measurements to Polaris to derive equators off a flat plane to call them outside edges of spheres with radial values. Well, those steps, if you know about them and ignore them, would mean deception. Now, I'm not going to claim that from 99% of our opponents. Some of them are just outright shills. But for the majority, they just didn't know. They didn't know that their globe Earth religion came from a flat plane measurement. Did you?
No, but according to the question, when did they come up with this molten iron core?
That's a necessity for their timeline. So the reason you need a molten iron core, and it needs to be oversized, is because of their journey through the heliocentric model with the scales of Kepler and the speed of light of Einstein. Gives them a certain timeline. Well, in their timeline, we've got to have A, something generating the magnetic fields, and B, something keeping us nice and cozy and warm in space. That would be a molten iron core. Not the right size based on the decay and the original formation of planetary-based molten iron cores that die off after a certain period. That's too short in the Kepler-based, Einsteinian-based, scaled, heliocentric world where we move around the sun through space. Well, in that instance, they need to extend the size and therefore life of the molten iron core so that it's still existing at this point of time based on Kepler's scales. And as I say, Huygens' Venus assumptions, which ultimately dictates the overall time frame and scales to each of these lights. Well, for that reason, they have the story of Thea, with the moon having an origin story in Earth in the respect that
Paper mache. Paper mache. That's all I'm hearing is paper mache.
I was in the middle of telling the Thea story, but okay, that's the end of that story.
I was waiting for the Thea story. So it's self-perpetuating. There was a glancing blow. Go ahead. Keep it going.
I got paper mache when I was about to start into Thea.
Sorry.
He's excited.
Okay, fine. So, yeah, the necessity leaves you with the origin story of the moon coming from a different planet that was orbiting around the sun like Earth and Mars or whichever other planets have formed in their story and narrative. But unbeknownst to the fledgling Earth, which was considerably smaller, it had a collision course imminent with Thea, a different planet, according to their story, which is true because they made it up themselves. Well, upon impacting with the fledgling Earth, Thea doesn't fully disintegrate. In fact, it deposits its gooey, juicy, delicious molten iron core into Earth. Now, through a prolonged period of gravitational accretion, the moon is formed from the debris of Thea and Earth's collision, and the molten iron core is left as an oversized molten iron core, still in effect today, many years later. So that is their story. There you go.
Takes a lot of faith to believe in that.
With all that heat being deposited, remember the other day they had a problem trying to figure out where the water came from? Dr. Becky couldn't figure out where the water came from.
Well, that'll take you to the ontological primitives, and it did with us, right? If you're going to start rewinding the arrow of time, that's entropic law, well, then you're going to always end up at where did it all begin? What created this? Doesn't matter if it's life or water, you end up at the ontological primitives. And you only have two options. Either nature created everything that we know. That would be to say that the nature created the water that we know in existence. They can kick the can down the road and say it was deposited by another entity. Or where did that entity create the water? It's the same when you talk about the origins of the knower, the creator, God. It's the same argument, so just kick it down the road. Well, no, nature didn't create the water here. It was deposited from an alien source. Give you, I don't know, snowballs coming from space. Yeah, again, it's back to they want you, like with the current rhetoric of this crap that they claim has come from an asteroid they've scooped something off into the sky vacuum. They want you to believe that the origin of this planet is gravitational accretion. Gravity is their god. You know, everything that we need for life was pulled in after the heart of dying stars exploded out in line with entropic law, after the formation of the heavier elements through fusion by way of second law and first law of thermodynamics violation in a sky vacuum, when the stars produce the materials that give us life in the heliocentric world. It's a very convoluted story, but it does have at least some continuity to it. Well, when we have the gravitational accretion to pull all of the materials, including snowballs and heavy metals and gold and all that crap, on Earth, they happen with enough time to be in the right place for nature on Earth to then create life. Right? That's what they have. That's their origin story. That's their answer to the ontological primitives. This whole bullshit is a way of getting around the first and second law of thermodynamics violations that are the answer to that side of the ontological primitives with nature creating anything that we experience. The other side being there is an external creator, otherwise known to you and I, commonly known as God. Well, when you realise that there is a violation of the law of nature that is the second law of thermodynamics and first law in the case of nature not being able to create itself, it only transferring, Well, then you realise that if it can't create itself, it can't create itself. You can't have nature creating itself when it violates a law of nature. That rules out that part of the ontological primitives, leaving you with one conclusion only. There was an external force that created this stuff.
Yeah, but they used to say gravity was a force. Now it's not a force, and the space is a flat space with space-time bending near objects. So they've changed their story quite a bit.
Yeah, it's got a lot of holes in it. That's why I said paper mache.
So does Mario
It's all
knows it's
falling apart.
Mario knows it's G. Says paper mache. I tried to do it over the top of Neil for you, Mario, but timing wasn't quite my strong point today. Thank you for the super chat. Okay, any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Well, the hypothesis can be made, but it's not viable because they can't continue on with it after observe and declare. So just because you see a phenomena and you say, okay, now what? So with space, how are they ever going to test it?
Oakley dokley. Let's move on to the second part of this week's videos.
Hang on. Did you say Oakley dokley?
He did.
It's Ned Flanders. You never seen Simpsons?
No, I'm just reminded that in 10 more shows, it'll be 1980, your channel name.
Maybe. That's very exciting. Yes, 1970, today's show. Okay, right.
So that means we're going to have a really good show, better than any show celebrating that name of that show, 1980, Nathan Oakley, Dokley.
I don't like to make such promises. I've got to be honest.
No, I'm making it.
Well,
Meg, before you go to the video, because yesterday, you say that there's plenty of phenomena when we look up in the sky, right? But there's no way that we could put it through a scientific method, right? Because we can't vary and manipulate anything up there.
I didn't say that. Quote me.
Well, why can't it go through the scientific method then?
I'm pretty sure I said it could.
But we can't because we can't. It hasn't been done yet. Anything when we look up at the stars is what I'm saying.
Does that mean it can't go through the scientific? The reason we're asking for a viable hypothesis, yeah, is because we know damn well that they've got plenty of phenomena to be going on with that they could formulate a hypothesis with. What's that you say? We've seen a light twinkle. No. It was bending around the geodesic in space-time based on the speed of light and the atmospheric conditions we've discovered with spectroscopy. Really? Oh, that sounds very interesting. Sorry, so you've seen a light twinkle. That's a phenomena. Now, the method that you have at your disposal that would give you an empirical outcome would be to suppose the cause of that effect you study. Not tell us it's a gravitational lensing effect in 4D space-time. No. That's a just so story. That's not establishing that what you suppose, in this case gravitational lensing, well, let's see you vary and manipulate that very natural, hypothetical, fourth dimensional, pseudo-geometric idea that Einstein invented called gravitational lensing. Let's see you vary and manipulate that as the cause of the effect, Neil. Oh, they can't. But they've still got a step one adherence. Observe natural phenomena. So that's why we ask for a hypothesis. Step two, suppose a cause. Formulate it with a null. That's it. Do they do that? No, we get the lensing story, Neil, from the pseudo four-dimensional space-time bullshit of Einstein. That's what we get. That's why we ask.
Do you think if they look back in history upon this era, it'll be thought of as the second dark ages?
Intellectually, probably. This will be the idiocracy age. Anybody seen Idiocracy?
Yeah, I couldn't take that movie though.
Yeah. My daughter was watching one of our phones, my youngest daughter, right? And my wife had got some educational thing that she brought up on her own phone. She went to Clover. I want you to watch this. So she gives her the phone. She's already holding one phone. So what she chose to do was hold both phones. I'm like, my God, I'm raising a kid in the land of idiocracy. Before I know it, she'll have 50 channels spread out all over a screen. You know, they also did it in, I think it was Back to the Future Part 2. You know, when they get the video screen, and he's like, I want the weather channel, I want the sports channel, I want this channel, I want 7, 8, 4, 3. And he just spreads them all out over the channel. It's just nothing but a wall of advertising. Same in Idiocracy. It's just a guy sat in a chair with all these million channels all spread out with just nothing but flashing of adverts constantly. That's the world we live in. It's a sad state of affairs. Now, we critique some of the people in our own arena. I had Anthony doing it today, telling me about Bev. He's finally figuring out the perspective hijacking aspect of the Earth curve calculators. Anthony and I went through the joyful journey of several years ago. Now it's been memorized and put out into our ether, let's just call it, by the words perspective hijacking, right? The Rayleigh criterion, right? 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height feet. Where's that come from? Well, that's why we call it the perspective hijacking Earth curve maths. Well, Bev is now going through that process, according to Anthony. I haven't watched any of this. I'm not that interested, but Anthony was keen to tell me that he was excited with watching the penny drop for Bev when he asks, where did they get that 1.2? Go on.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I ain't taking away. So in another 6 years, he'll get that there's a horizontal baseline for all that mathematics.
Maybe. But while we're critiquing people who have obviously got, I'm not going to knock Bev. Bev is not stupid, right? He's got a reasonable level of discernment. Some things he does are stupid. Don't get me wrong. And we point those out. I'm not going to do it now when I'm complimenting him. What I'm saying is, Bev doesn't represent your average Joe Normie, does he?
No.
No. He's a step above, in case you hadn't picked that up from the audience. If you're the guy that didn't pick that up, bugger off, go elsewhere, you're not welcome. There's a standard here.
I hate to disagree, but I'm not having Joe Normie castigated like that. No,
I'm not castigating Joe Normie. I'm raising up
anybody.
I'm raising up the standard of Bev, not castigating Joe Normie.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, he isn't at that level. No. It's very nice if you don't want to be rude to somebody to say that, but if you want honesty, no, he's nowhere near.
You're desperate to spin this. That's not my
struggle to compete with and comprehend. No, Joe Normie would comprehend those things. Level, flat. Joe Normie doesn't have a problem with these things. Yeah? No, Bev's not at that level.
Okay. Bev has got an inquiring mind that the general consensus-driven population that we encounter, and I'm naming Joe Normie, doesn't have. I'm pretty sure you know where I was going, but you were desperate to spin that, weren't you, Adam?
Yes. Just.
Right, number one, I am, as an individual, pretty damn fickle. Now, if you haven't picked up on this already, that's fine, but I am. In other words, I'll be shouting down Bev for his utter stupidity. You can do F all with an angle nonsense. And then the next breath I'll say, no, well, actually, no, I don't think the guy's stupid. I do think he's got an inquiring mind. He is on a journey of discovery. The fact that we went on that path quite a long time ago have now got catchphrases like begging the question, proof of nothing. Bev. Perspective hijacking. Earth curve calculator. Yeah, when you figure out it's the Rayleigh criterion, just let us know. Anyway, the point is that he's getting there, isn't he? That's not Joe Normie. Come on. Back me up, Adam. Come on. I know it means you've got to compliment Bev to a degree.
Because Joe Normie can cope with level is straight. Joe Normie doesn't take 2 years to figure out the black swan. Joe Normie doesn't have to admit he doesn't understand things, but spends time attacking people. This is the trouble with disingenuous people. Yeah? I'm not here to give him flattery. All I can do is view it. And if you're going to say something like, yeah, he's a little bit sharper than the average, there, boo-boo.
There it is.
I can only disagree, mate. I can only disagree from what's been evidenced. No, he's nowhere near as sharp as the average bear, as exemplified by his visits to us here, by his own YouTube stuff. Whether that idiocy has to be portrayed because he's got an agenda, different matter. But no, he doesn't demonstrate to me that he's a well clued up into it. If he's still not figured out why it's perspective hijacking, then your argument falls apart, mate.
I mean, I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say you face the public daily, and if you're telling me that you could rattle off the black swan and have somebody immediately understand it as a general Joe public member, I would beg to differ.
No, I didn't say that. If after 2 years and making shows about it, like last night, mind your P's and Q's, Emma, yeah? If after 2 years of that, you still weren't actually able to comprehend the point was being made to you, and your rebuttals only ever demonstrated your lack of understanding of the logical syllogism, lack of understandings of the claim of a ball, yeah? And your direction of critique was at the flat earthers presenting this ball destroying evidence, but all you could do was attack them and demonstrate your lack of understanding. That's what I'm referring to.
Someone dig this out. I think we're going to end up covering this today, 10th, it looks like. If someone can dig out Bev's yesterday video, it seems that not only did Anthony go out of his way to call me about this, but you've also watched it, which means at the very least somebody can put the link to the video for Bev so he can get a shout out and people can go and let Bev know at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me.
Okay, until then, please, this is a part 2 of a part 3 thing that you should do in order. Bev can wait. My gosh.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I don't know why I even
Well,
said
then, see, you're fickle. You just got fickle.
I am totally fickle, aren't I?
That's
why
why
I'm like I am with Jaren. That's what I was getting to with that, actually. Likewise, the example with Bev is now over, so I won't reiterate that. But same goes with Jaren. You're like, this guy's calling you a scammer, but you still want to go out of your way to try and get him to understand science. I mean, at the moment, I'm not doing that. I'm having a little jab about the amount of views I get. Because I'm a prick. I'm just messing with him. But you know what I mean? Yeah, I'm very fickle. Yeah, I'll forget pretty quickly.
Yeah, but that's annoying.
Go on.
Listen.
But most of the time, your frustration is usually at your inability to convey the information in a way that they can understand it. That's what causes you to be fickle.
Here, let me remind you. I'm sorry, John. Go on. I apologize.
Because they're not getting it. You get frustrated with them, and it's understandable, because we're just human. We all have our faults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bev told me personally that the angle to Polaris establishes your latitude. Then Bev comes on the show, doesn't disagree, told me that, and then says you can do F all with an angle. Well, okay, can we move on now?
Yes, we can. Unless anybody's got any last remarks on this. But shout out to Bev. Hopefully someone's put a link to him. Please let Bev know at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. Like anybody else that we cover on the show, he does deserve the algorithmic love. Bev will be as bottom of the list as we are in that regard. If anything, he deserves more. So go and let him know, please. Hopefully someone will put a link to Bev's channel and the most recent video. In the meantime, once that's happened, I have and will again now put a link to this videographer, as we are actually covering him visually as well as just chatting about him, as we've just done with Bev. And again, it's Astronavigation for Beginners, and the videographer's name, which is Aswan something or other, I can't quite remember his name, Aswan Karula. So check him out. Again, let him know at Nathan Oakley 1980 sent me. But this is a different link to yesterday's because it's part 2. So unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with a lot of main term and distorted, overdriven microphones and various other stuff. But that's just the way it goes, I'm afraid. Not a lot I can do about it. Why have I got no sound?
All right, welcome back to part 2.
There we go.
I'm in OpenSCAD now, and the purpose of this particular module is going to be, we're going to try and repeat Eratosthenes' experiment. Well, not experiment actually, we're just going to repeat his procedure, and we're going to figure out the radius of the Earth. But at the same
Wow, I didn't even have to make the correction. He made it for me.
time, we're going to realize that the concepts that he
You hear that? Not an experiment. So why did he accidentally call it one? Well, because it makes it sound more sciencey, doesn't it? And what's science? Well, science is a method of providing empirical validation of cause and effect relationships. This definitely isn't that. But if you call it an experiment, people prick their ears up and think that you're proving something, because that's what science does with experiments.
uses and the principles that he uses extremely significant for astronavigation. And
yeah, what it'll be doing is utilizing the flat plane that you've got bisecting this sphere with these lines here. Yeah, because this will be plotted out on the equatorial plane that's already being hinted at.
if you understand this part, the rest of it should be easy. So let's start. Okay, so this is OpenSCAD, and this is a 3D model of the Earth that I've made.
Yeah. Is this going to be a reification fallacy then?
Okay, so you can see there's a little hole in it over here. Right here there's a hole. Okay, now the way the story works is so Eratosthenes knew the Earth was curved. He knew it was a sphere, right, like this.
So step one, assume Earth is a sphere by saying, I already know Earth is a sphere. That's step one. Shout out to Sterling Archer. Sterling Archer? That's the cartoon from like 10 years ago. They're like Bob's Burgers voice guy. Shout out to you, my friend. Thank you very much for the super chat. Arwin, how about that military discussion? ? You coward. Okay, Sterling Archer. Thank you for the super chat.
Well, hold on a minute. But how could he already know it's a sphere, but be using the Earth as a baseline for his angles?
I think they get around that by slightly confusing people when they draw out a parallel, not a parallel, a vertical that's obviously with respect to you being at the top of a presupposed spherical Earth. Then they've got the well, so they draw out the angle by making the reference to the vertical rather than the horizontal that's obviously implicitly required when you're talking about anything vertically. But that's, I think, why they use the well, so that they can semi move themselves away from the horizontal that's also required by using the vertical down the well. Am I wrong?
Right, a vertical is 90 degrees, right?
Yeah, but if they only reference the well and the vertical line that goes down it, and then talk about the shadows from the sun, people won't be paying so much attention to the horizontal requirement because they're only talking about the vertical when they talk about the well.
Right, Nathan. The other bit they miss, sorry, it's one deck. The other bit they miss as well in this is, as after he's, measured the angle between two locations and got an angle of 7.2 degrees, which is what he did. We'll give him that. We'll let him have that. But then he divides 7.2 into 360 degrees. Now, where did he get that from? Where did he get his 360?
He already said it. He assumes we're on a globe. So you can make the math work within the assumption.
But he's making the ground the protractor. When he makes that assumption, it's not so much that he's taking the measurement from a flat plane, but the angle that he's taking is a perspective representation. Whereas when they transpose that into the globe assumption, as on screen now, the protractor becomes the ground. That's how it's done. So in this case, the line that they've got on screen now, right? I don't care which orientation he's going to make his example with. I'm just going to use what's on screen now. We're going to call this the line of the equatorial plane, right? That goes through the center of the sphere Earth. Well, that is what will actually be used with you standing at the center of it. And if you're measuring out an angle, doesn't matter if it's a shadow or an angle to a star, you're measuring it with reference to this horizontal plane. Now, like I said earlier, if you've got a well, you can just try and ignore that and just only reference the vertical plane. But the two are intrinsically tied together. But what you've actually done is created a protractor over your position. That's what you're measuring. That's the angle. That's the angle they're referring to. But they're making that protractor the surface of the sphere. Now, the angles still have to tie up to whatever you're measuring. If it's an angle from a shadow from a sun or an angle from a star in navigation, it will still have to work, but it will move, as they describe with parallel light rays, to the center so that they can use it on the flat plane, the equatorial plane. So it still makes sense. But what they're doing is adding in a protractor of radius 3959 miles and calling it the ground when you're standing in the protractor to get any of these angles. Does that make sense?
That's cheating.
That's the trick. That's the magic trick. Cheating, yeah, that's the trick of converting flat planes to balls. That's right. Yeah, it's a swindle.
From the beginning, I shared all the citations that all the angles for true altitude of said star or sun is from the rational horizon, which is the equatorial plane. And every sextant navigation measurement must adhere to that. So
Paula wants me to point out the other important detail, which would have come at the end. The equatorial plane that I just described, I think bifurcating this sphere as claimed to be a reification of the surface of Earth, which it isn't. Paul is pointing out that what's being navigated, well, if they're claiming this is the surface, then this is what must be navigated. And I'll just bring it up actually as Paula said it. Shout out to you, Paula. It says, but the equatorial plane isn't the surface being navigated at Nathan Oakley 1980. Correct. For them, they claim the surface is up here. For us, we're just using a grid-based system to navigate. But I'm not reifying that equatorial plane into the ground we're standing on. It's a useful flat plane system that does reference the flat plane we measure. They have a curved surface, and that is definitely not what we are navigating, even when we're describing it with the equatorial plane, when measuring, in reality, a flat plane. Because that's what we actually deal with. But thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. It wasn't a super chat. Thank you for the comment, Paula. Shout out to Shatner's Bassoon. Up the FED, up the panel. Please share the show. Indeedy. Thank you for the super chat.
But he wanted to figure out what the radius was. All right.
So he assumes Earth's a ball. Then he wants to know what the radius is of his assumed ball. Gotcha.
So now I'm gonna twist the story a little bit to suit my purposes. So if you want to look that up, I suggest you look it up on Wikipedia. It's an amazing story of science. But I'll just.
It's an amazing story of science. No, science establishes cause and effect relationships based on naturally occurring phenomena. There's no storytelling. There's experiments. And they either prove your cause to be true, or they prove your null hypothesis to be true. That's what experiments do. But this is a story of science. Great if you look it up on Wiki. Oh my God.
Let's use the parts of it that are necessary for me, okay? So what Eratosthenes did is he had a water well. So this is just a, you can see this is a hole in the earth. That's what a water well is, right? So what he did is he had this well, right? And so now let me show you a cutaway section of the earth just by editing my OpenSCAD code, right? You wouldn't have a well that's dug into the earth in this direction. A well would point towards the center of the earth because you cut them vertically downwards, right?
So therefore you assume that all lines that are vertical are actually reciprocating zenith angles moving to the center of a sphere Earth that Eratosthenes assumed when he decided that Earth was a sphere and that he was going to get a radius. Suddenly, parallel lines that are vertical aren't parallel. They move around a spherical Earth. Well, that's absurd. But there we go. That's what I already said it before we got here. But yeah, that's what they're doing.
So when he says going to the center of the earth, well, I don't know if he's ever lived on property or dug for a well like I have, but there are water tables, and neighbors next to you could tap into the same aquifer, and that could be a big one or a small one. So it's not necessarily all going down to the center of the earth. It's just underground.
Yeah, but Eratosthenes is assuming that Earth's a sphere and he's trying to get a radius for it. So therefore, when he digs the well, he's going to assume that the well's going to the center of it because he's assumed Earth's a sphere. So he can get its radius.
Right. But just remember what this guy said. Twist my story to suit my purposes. I'm only going to use the parts that are necessary for me. That's what he said before he went on to this. So just keep that in mind.
And it's a nice scientific story that you can look up the entirety of on Wiki if you choose to.
Now, what Eratosthenes did is he knew the Earth was a sphere, all right?
Got to make sure we all know that several times.
But he
Can we
wanted to
pause here for a
calculate the
second?
radius.
Can we pause here? This is a major point when I'm talking to people. If you're going to assume the Earth is a sphere, and then you take an angle measurement of 7.2 degrees from the shadow of a stick, you already believe you're on the sphere. So now you're going to use the math to prove what curvature this Earth needs so that you can find the radius. This is bollocks. You have to first prove that the Earth is a sphere before you assume it, and they haven't done that.
Well, you couldn't take angle measurements from its surface if it was a sphere.
Exactly, but they're not, even though they are, because they're all referencing the equatorial plane when they talk this way, as you'll find out.
Right. So he's not presupposing it's the surface is curving when he takes his angle.
No, that's the heist. That's what Neil said was unfair.
Okay, so he wanted to calculate this distance from the center of the Earth to the Earth's surface. He wanted this radius r, all right? And this is how he did that. Okay, so let me show you something else here, which is he waited for a particular day of the year. Okay, he waited for a particular day of the year when the sun was directly overhead this well, right? So this is the ray of light coming from the sun. Okay, this is a ray of light coming from infinity, from the sun. Okay, the sun is actually sending a whole lot of parallel rays towards the Earth. Okay, but this one ray, this one yellow ray that you see, now that's actually going straight into the well, right? And you can see the reflection of the sun over here. So when Eratosthenes saw this point, so let me show you, going straight into the well.
Please. Okay,
Sounds archaic to me.
No, we just have to remind that in part one, he did his darndest to say that sunlight is coming parallel, which we know it's divergent. So see how they have to set that up first in the mind before they fool you?
Right? And you can see the reflection of the sun over here. So when Eratosthenes saw this point, so let me show you this again. Let's turn that a little bit. So when Eratosthenes, that's the reflection of the sun, right? So when he saw that dead center in his well, in the center of the well, he knew that the sun was perfectly above this point on Earth. So he knew that this angle was 90 degrees. So if this is, now this is where the 3D and the 2D become a little difficult to understand.
Right. You seem to brush over that. 90 degrees to what?
Seems to know a lot,
But
this
he knew that
Eratosthenes,
this-
doesn't he? He already knows the Earth's a curve, but he's not measured that yet. And he knows exactly where the sun is. He's quite a clever guy.
This angle was 90 degrees. Wherever you looked, this angle was 90 degrees.
What angle? That's not an angle. What are you talking about? That's not 90 degrees. Get a bit closer to my screen. Correct me if I'm wrong, has he just drawn a little square off the vertical line to the curve and called it 90 degrees?
Yes, he hasn't drawn the tangent plane that he needs to, which he can't have with the sphere. So this is why you're spotting it.
Don't worry about what he hasn't done. What he has done is drawn a box from a vertical meeting a curve and said it's 90. That's what he's done.
Cheating.
Another assumption.
No, it's just not 90.
I know that.
Let me just show the audience, right? I hope can you see my mouse? This is not 90.
Just for this one ray of light going into the well.
Go on, John.
and therefore everything after that point
Fails.
falls apart.
Yep.
Yep.
From this point forth, absolutely. I should have said that, John. Well done. From this point forward, this does not work. It fails because he needs a reference to horizontal. And what are we measuring? Well, we're measuring the surface. It's not giving him it. This is not 90. He's mentioned it twice. Let's just hear it again.
Understand? But he knew that this angle was 90 degrees. Wherever you look,
No, it isn't.
this angle was 90
Fail.
degrees. Just for this one ray of light going into the well. Okay?
90 degrees to a curved surface. No, it isn't. This fails.
And that's why if I turn this around slightly and now show you the side view, you can see that, right? If this was Eratosthenes' local horizon, right? So the part of the earth that looked flat to him, this angle would be exactly 90 degrees. Now what he did, he sent...
Wait, what did he say?
He knows the Earth's a sphere. He's measuring its radius. But for the bit that's flat... No, he's contradicting what he's actually measuring. If he assumes that the area that he's measuring is flat, then he isn't measuring a sphere. You don't just draw out a nice flat surface and say, what is local horizon? No. The horizon's where the ground or sea meet the sky. Not some point out, if you extend it out here, is floating out in space devoid of the ground and is from every single point from where you draw this 90. Nothing is on the ground. So what are you talking about? Where are you getting this tangent?
Hold on. I think it's a good time to point out that there are no flat surfaces on a sphere at all.
He's just drawn one with an explanation that we're assuming we're a sphere and measuring a sphere, and we're getting a radius of the sphere. So therefore, when I measure it flat and get 90 from it, which I definitely will get from a flat and only from a flat surface, which would be completely impossible at all points on the spherical Earth, I'm assuming.
Also, even if he's going to try that trick with the horizon, the point is on the ground. There would be no horizon in that mathematical description. So that's invalid. He can't flatten out a spot, cut the top off an orange, any of that ridiculousness. He has to use that point, and that point does not give you 90 on the surface of the sphere.
Exactly. Where he drew out 90 and it did not exist, and now infers that Eratosthenes is going to assume that we've got a flat plane meeting the well at 90? Why would he do that if he's trying to measure Earth to sphere? Wouldn't he not see the flaw in his own methodology that requires Earth to be flat? But it gets worse, because that's not all he's going to do. This parallel light that he drew earlier and then quickly got rid of all the lines that he told you with an infinite sun, well, not 97 million miles. All right, okay, fine. But we've got an infinitely distant sun, so we definitely got the parallel light rays. Why? Well, because none of this works on the curved surface. So what's he going to do next? He's going to put it on the equatorial plane that I detailed earlier, with the protractor around you and not a globe Earth with you standing on its surface anymore. That's what he's going to do.
The student
So let me get this right. He knows
Nathan,
the
hang on, Nathan. Hang on, Nathan.
Hold on. Go ahead, one deck.
I'll just get clearing up in my head, Nathan. So he knows the Earth's a sphere and he's not measured it, but when he's utilising the surface of the Earth, he's using it as a flat baseline.
Yes.
Ah, right. Gotcha.
Yeah, 10th.
Yeah, if you go to the last slide of Master B that I put, it's from Ben from Taboo Conspiracy on the Black Swan. And if you assume a 10-mile local horizon, well, you can easily, because the last oil platform was 9.41 miles and the horizon is well beyond that. So if it was the local horizon in this way of thinking was 10 miles, then Eratosthenes' local horizon would have proved the Earth with a radius of 264,000 miles, not 3959, to show the folly of this.
Well, no, they can't do that. The point is where the line intersects the ground. that's where your horizon would be. You can't extend it out and say that's 90. It doesn't work that way.
Right. I'm not coming from that argument. I'm coming within their fallacious reasoning when he assumed the Earth was a sphere and his local horizon, okay, with the shadow or whatever, 7.2 degrees, and then he does the math to get the curve. But if he's going to reference his local horizon on any given day, that could be closer or further based on the weather.
Yeah, that's not going to establish him as a flat tangent point. If he did, then ground isn't the ground anymore, as he's drawn a tiny little line. I mean, it's better depicted on yours, because you've got this green triangle. You're like, no, we're dealing with the ground. No, we're not dealing with lines that go out into space so that you can have a flat plane. Why would you need this? If you're describing Earth and measuring Earth and claiming to get radii, then you don't need any of it to be flat. Quite the contrary. But you do to do the measurements. Oh, so you do need it to be flat? Yeah. Do you hear the sound of those V10s and V12s? That's a load of Lamborghinis with people screaming out the window. You're going to need a flat Earth for this. Because your R-based measurement has its origins in a flat plane measurement. It's a measurement being taken on a flat plane. You're ruining the conclusion.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a double whammy because he started the whole video series by saying he just wants to share concepts in astronavigation. Okay, well, the zenith position of the star has a GP, the zenith position of the observer with the sextant has a GP, and they must share the same baseline. Thousands of miles of horizontal baseline must be shared in order to get zenith distance. So he's killing himself more ways than one.
All the way over here, sent him over to a place, okay, somewhere else, right? And asked this person that, so what he did is Eratosthenes waited for the sun, okay, as the sun moved in the sky, he waited until the sun was dead overhead, and he knew that that was in the center of the well, and then he sent a smoke signal, okay? So he sent a signal by smoke like this, which this student...
So you're just going to make up a new story that isn't the same story. So in this story, let me get it straight. Eratosthenes made a freaking smoke signal when the actual story is it happened a year later on the same day. What's going on? Why has he invented this smoke signal bullshit?
Well, he has to do something to know, to prove or to put something forward. How they knew the person 500 stadia away knew the sun was directly overhead, so they have to have some sort of either 2 cups and a piece of string or some sort of communication. So he's just making some bullshit up again.
I see. So Morse code, smoke signal, whatever. I mean, let's just say they had a primitive form of fax machine.
I was just going to say, it sounds a bit archaic to me.
Recognized, right?
So we judge according to this story, radii of the Earth by measuring a flat plane and using smoke signals. Oh dear, why isn't this underneath globe Earth videos in a wiki tramp stamp?
And this guy's job was, this student, his job was, at that very moment, when Eratosthenes sent in the smoke signal, right? So at the same moment that the sun was dead ahead, dead above.
And he should be grateful to have that job. This is Asif, the assistant, and he used to be known as Asif Mr. Go and Get the Bloody Cup of Coffee. Now he's dealing with the smokes. I mean, he's had a major promotion in this. Why isn't Asif getting more credit?
Of Eratosthenes, right? So there's the sun right here. Sun is over here somewhere, right? So it's right above Eratosthenes, and Eratosthenes knew that by the reflection of the well, in the well, sends the smoke signal. At that very moment, this student was...
At that very moment? Hold on a second. I've seen the first puff. Second puff. Third puff.
Okay. Listen, I'm dying here. Okay, so he used the smoke signal, right? But I don't know if he says it or not. I can't remember. But, you got to start with the seconds, minutes, hours, day. It's got to be so precise so that you're not too far off, right? So I can just imagine that fire starting. By the time it gets high enough for someone to see it, if you could even see it 500 miles away.
Hold on a
Yeah.
second. That's a good point.
Then-
Wouldn't the smoke
then-
signals prove a
sorry.
flat plane, if nothing else?
Well, that's the thing. You would have to burn all of Europe, even on a flat plane, to get those smoke signals to be seen.
Can someone just check the Metabunk calculator and see if they've got a Stadia conversion?
It might be why they say there was 2% out or something of the original curve measurement, which hasn't yet been measured, because the smoke might have been a bit delayed when the sun was directly over the well.
Yes, indeed.
That's percent.
Yeah, that's a
error.
couple of percent of the other measurement that never gets referenced, that nobody's ever done, that it was within the 2% of. That measurement that's never been seen and nobody's ever measured was only out by 2%, that we can't confirm and contrast and make sure it's 2% of it, because of the smoke signals. That's right. It took a little bit of time, and obviously they're only going to be a little bit out when Asif, which is usually the guy who's Mr. Go and get the bloody cup of coffee, is reading those smoke signals, 500 stadia away. Plus,
Listen,
did they
Nathan, hold on.
even factor in?
If this was the, sorry, let you stop.
Go ahead,
I'm
Neil.
saying if this was the level of proof that you guys were putting forth for flat Earth, I would not be a flat earther. Are you kidding me? People really hold on to this as it's some sort of truth?
Yeah, it's archaic, isn't it?
Was
Well,
told.
listen.
Now you measure the
Hang on. This is too good to pass up. So I just did the math in their Earth curve calculator. If the distance to the object is 500 miles and the eyesight level is a 6-foot man, the distance, the obscured object would be 164,000 feet behind the curve. You needed to start that fire a week before.
angle of the sun.
And
All right, so let's see how that happened. So let me just come back here to my OpenSCAD and let's just let us. Obviously, there's rays of light coming everywhere, right? So there's rays of light coming like this, all over this globe. Okay, some of them are just going past the globe also. They're not even hitting the globe. They're just going straight past the globe. But I'm just showing you only in this one
Yes.
plane of the Earth. Just this one plane. Okay.
It's the globe, but when claiming to calculate the value of radius, he's had to utilize a flat plane to do so. It's that one with the light that's claimed to be at a set distance in the heliocentric model based on Kepler and Huygens is now at an infinite distance, so that we can have this blag of parallel light rays. Yes.
That's all that's of importance to us. All right, so
Right.
let's turn this a little bit.
Even in that assumption, though, the parallel ones, it'll still be hitting the equatorial plane at 90 degrees.
Correct. That's what he's got it drawn to. He's not got there yet, but he will.
Job done. Perfect. So we have a beautiful 30.
Oh, have I clicked onto a different video?
Well, he lost
Okay,
his
so this
accent.
is part 3 now of the sun is actually sending a whole lot of parallel rays towards the Earth. Okay, but this one ray, this one saw this
Sorry, I
Tosthenes.
accidentally pressed on the timeline.
That's the now this one ray, right? Student of this part of the well. This guy was. How that happened?
Nathan.
Show the what
Got
the
it,
student
got
was
it.
seeing. Okay, so let's render that. All right, here we are again.
Yeah.
Now these are now all the rays of light coming from the sun. Obviously, there's rays of light
Hang
coming
on.
everywhere, right?
Hang on. I posted in Master B 2 images of divergent light, and then I posted that high altitude balloon showing the GP of the sun. How does that even conform to what he's saying now?
It doesn't.
So there's rays of light coming like this, all over this globe. Okay, some of them are just going past the globe also. They're not even hitting the globe. They're just going straight past the globe. But I'm just showing you only in this one plane of the Earth, just this one plane. Okay, that's all that's of importance to us. All right, so Let's turn this a little bit.
Sorry, is that just the flat
Okay.
plane of the Earth on the sphere?
Now here comes the geometry.
He's getting there. He's getting there.
Sphere.
He's getting there.
Right? It's simple geometry, but it's monumental geometry, right? So okay, so this is Eratosthenes' local horizon, right? He sees the sun at 90 degrees, okay?
To the flat plane that he needs.
But because the Earth is curved thus,
Then it's not 90 degrees.
the observer over here does not see the sun at 90 degrees. You look here, this is overhead
Nobody sees it at 90 degrees to anything if the surface is curved.
for this observer over here. So if the student is standing here like this is right ahead for him. And now if he puts a stick over here, he'll get, let's say he put a stick over here, he would get the shadow of the sun because the sun is now reaching him at an angle. You can see that?
No, what you've drawn out is one straight line moving towards the parallel light to your infinite sun that you told us when you had a string of assumptions you told us weren't assumptions. But the second line is meeting curve. That is not an angle. Do you not understand what an angle is? It's two straight lines. What you have just drawn for Asif is not an angle.
Okay. Now what you need to see is that here it's 90, okay?
What 90? There are no 90s here.
Here it's a little less than 90.
No, it isn't. It's not 90 or a little less than 90. It's not an angle. Two straight lines will give you an angle. As John said earlier, about 5 minutes ago. From this point on, it's just a total fail.
Here it's a little less than 90.
No, it's not an angle at all. Not less than 90, just not an angle. You need two straight lines.
Less than that, and then less than that, until at some point there'll be some ray of light which is coming from the sun. And so as this person moves further and further away, he'll observe the sun because his local horizon is changing, you see. This is the local vertical for him. See this? Because the Earth is curved. The Earth is a sphere. So each person, depending on where you are, will observe the sun at a different angle. Right?
This guy conceded in his last video that you couldn't get an angle from a curve, and now he's just ignoring what he conceded.
Yes.
And saying Earth is a sphere about 4 times.
He's reaffirming the nonsense waffle that doesn't make sense with non-angles. Yes.
Let me show you that again. So, this observer here, right, if this is the vertical for that observer, he observes the sun at this angle.
Not
And
an
this angle, so supposing we call this A, right? And Eratosthenes' angle, let's
I see. There's where he's done it so he can do the same trick with the well. So now he's drawing the angle off the vertical. Yeah? You probably can't see this in the chat, but for the live audience, they can see what he's now doing. So, right. So it's the angle off the vertical. So, so it's almost like we've eradicated this absolute necessity of the two to be completely conjoined. That would be vertical and horizontal. With respect to the ground that we're going to curve? Oh, right. But if it doesn't give you an angle, and we only take the angle when assuming parallel light rays from the vertical, it's almost like the horizontal vanishes. It doesn't matter that we need a flat plane to do this anymore. Yeah, that's why they use a well.
let's
Yeah.
Well, everything. Yeah, listen, I corrected Charles flat out map on this because he was claiming that a zenith angle doesn't require a horizontal, just a vertical. And I made a video on this and I showed a citation, several of them, where it showed that a zenith angle is the exact same thing as an elevation angle. It's just a 90-degree angle that's read in the opposite way. So an elevation angle is read from the horizontal up to the vertical, whereas a zenith angle is read from the vertical down to the horizontal. But they're still exactly the same thing. So people who try to equivocate with a zenith angle are literally either uninformed or lying to people. It's one or the other.
Well, they want to live in 2 dimensions where there's only the vertical plane. We've heard that from flat earthers as well.
say B, and we know B is equal to 90, right? Because it's right ahead, it's directly above him, and its reflection is dead center in the well, okay? Which means that if you draw a line from the sun, okay, go all the way through its reflection and go down to the center of the earth, it will eventually touch the center of the earth. That's what it means to have something directly overhead you. So I want you to stop for a minute and just think about what that means.
That's wrong. That's not what Eratosthenes did. That is not what happened. That's why he used the obelisk and the well, not just a well, or not just an obelisk. He used the obelisk and the well. The sun's GP was directly over the well, and he got a 7.24 angle off of his vertical, off the zenith, to the sun. But the GP was over the well. And that the only way that works is for, like, he can mathematically try and bring an angle afterwards to the center of a sphere. But the only way it actually works in reality is for the horizontal of Eratosthenes' zenith angle to stretch to the well, and that be the GP of the sun.
Yeah, you're going to need a flat
It
plane
doesn't
to
work
do
any
this.
other way.
Absolutely correct. You will need a flat plane to do this. Absolutely correct. He's doing this so he can transpose the Eratosthenes example to the equatorial plane. He's using it for his own ends. That's why he's deviated. And he doesn't mind being a bit liberal with the truth in terms of smoke signals and stuff. We didn't major on that minor because he's already disclosed. I'm just using this for my own ends because he's going to be detailing navigation. So he's got to get this to the equatorial plane, and he's got old familiar Eratosthenes to do it with.
Wherever you are on the earth, right? If something is directly above you, overhead you, if you draw a line between your position, which is here, and that object, that line should go all the way to the center of the earth.
He's saying it twice because he needs to take what we're going to do with navigation away from the globe Earth and its curvy surface and to the flat plane in the middle of it. That's what he's got to do somehow. That's why he's reiterated it.
If that object is not...
The Earth in the Earth, the flat Earth inside the Earth, we need that. So you understand that this light ray that's directly overhead, that basically puts you in the center of Earth. We're all cool with that. We're all cool with being in the center of Earth now. It all makes sense. All good. Let's repeat it. So if it didn't, it does now.
Not directly above you. So for instance, this observer...
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it might be a little bit of reverb. That was my point yesterday about their parallel light claims from their sun and from the stars. You take all that away with the full moon shadow. That's all taken away. Takes the claim away completely. They can't claim anything because you can claim the opposite and they can't disprove it. That was the whole point. Is once you take that away, they can't bring it into the center of the globe because that's what they're doing. It's all mathematical, based off a pre-assumption. You can't bring things to the center of the globe. So they're just trying to claim that while ignoring the airplane, for instance, that will fly 6 miles above the Mariner, that's taking an angle to Polaris and get the exact same angle as the Mariner, right? But the Mariner is claimed to get an angle because he's being blocked by aircraft. But what's blocking the pilots, the navigator on the plane? There's no aircraft blocking that navigator. So how come they get the exact same angle? So there's this whole parallel light ray thing. You take that away and they have nothing when it comes to celestial navigation.
Right? The sun is not directly above. It's at some angle, which he calculated by, using the shadow and the stick method, whatever that angle is.
Off a flat plane.
But if you draw a line now between this guy's point and where he thinks the sunlight is coming from, you notice that it doesn't go through the center of the earth. Okay, let me show you again. Wherever you are on the earth, so let's say you're here, you have an object directly above you, overhead. If you join that object with your position, which is here, it will go through the center of the earth because the earth is a sphere. That's simple geometry. Okay? All right. So now we have this angle, which is 90 degrees. All right.
No, it isn't. Someone needs a lesson in what an angle is.
Right? And here comes the genius part now. This is...
Genius? You don't even know what an angle is. That's not 90. Idiot. This is not 90 degrees. You are wrong.
Eratosthenes' genius, right? And this is the observer, right? And he measures this angle from the vertical.
From the vertical? All right. So what, does the horizontal flat plane requirement vanish? No, it doesn't.
And it turns out to be this, right? Now, Eratosthenes said, let's draw a line between the center of the Earth, okay, and this observer's position. So draw a line here, and then draw a line between the point where the sun is directly overhead. So this is the point on the Earth's surface where the sun is directly overhead, okay? So draw a line that joins these two, all right? Eratosthenes said this angle, right, measured at the center of the Earth is equal to this angle. Now you can see that that's just simple
center of the Earth, moron.
Geometry. If these two lines are parallel, if this line is parallel to this line, okay, and this is just one line going through this point on Earth. Remember, this line is parallel to this line, okay? Let me show that again. This is critical, so pay close attention to this, right? So here's the observer. Join him to the center of the Earth.
Here's the observer going to the center of the Earth. This is critical. You all understand? Observer at the center of Earth. We all clear?
Right? And this is the point on the Earth where the sun is directly overhead. So join this to the center of the Earth. If this is indeed a perfect circle, right? So in astronavigation, we just assume the Earth is a perfect circle. It's not a perfect sphere. It's not really, but
No,
we just assume it is.
Yeah.
He seems to be overlooking that he's still doing it from the center of Earth, though.
What he's doing is he's making himself a protractor and justifying why the protractor is the surface.
So, you know, the difference is because of the oblate spheroid and things.
Go on, Brian.
Yeah, it's much worse than that. This is not, what he's detailing there is a globe way out mathematically for helping them believe they can do celestial navigation on a sphere. But that's not what Eratosthenes did. It's very clear what Eratosthenes said. The reason for their claim of parallel light from their sun is because Eratosthenes stated that if the sun is this big and this far away, it'll match its angular size and it'll give us the same shadows we see in reality on a sphere of this size. But if it's not that big and far away, if it's small and local, then the Earth is flat. The only way he could explain away the shadows was not by bringing that into the center of any globe. It was by coming up with the parallel light ray BS. That's the Eratosthenes story. And he also, just 1 second, he also said, Earth is a sphere, but it's not a perfect circle. It's like, well, you can't do what you're doing. He doesn't even understand what he's doing. Requires it to be a perfect circle. It can't be an oblate spheroid. Otherwise, it won't work. It can't work. What they need to do by bringing the angle to the center, it can't work with an oblate spheroid. It can only work because the latitude and longitude grid won't work with an oblate spheroid. It's a perfect circle. They have to create a perfect circle via the hijacking of the latitude and longitude grid. So this is all completely wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Sorry, John.
Right, but the mathematical get out is not a mathematical get out. The moment that he took and claimed that he could get a curve, an angle from a curve, it invalidated all the mathematics. This is a smoke screen. There's nothing here. There's nothing to see here. It's all wrong.
They're all just puffs of smoke and smoke signals. Right, we're at the 11-minute and 44 in part 2, and we will continue with this tomorrow on the next stream. But, unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ Panel for making today's live show possible. And, of course, a massive thank you to all of you for tuning in, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, hitting me up on PayPal, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!
Shout out to Original D-Rose for smashing the super chat right at the end of the live stream. He says, here's a little something for you, Nathan. Here's a little something for you. Thank you very much for the super chat. Stay tuned if you're watching on an after show.